Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. Today's show is sponsored by Ringmaster, on a mission to launch B2B podcasts that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth. Ringmasterlive.com. Bam. All right, I did it. I started. It's like, oh no, I've let go of the dock, and here we go off into the wild raging river. This thing is started. I'm really excited. I can't wait to get started and introduce everyone to this guest. He is back for this second time, and we know only the smartest folks and the most amazing folks and friendly and just brilliant people come back. And I am so honored that he is doing this. Who is he? Who is this guy, Casey, you keep talking about? I would consider him the godfather of marketing technology. I would say a top 10 marketing thought leader, at least for me personally. And I'm sure many, many, many millions of other marketers would say the same. Entrepreneur, editor, creator of what was used to be known as the MarTech 5000, which has now grown and grown and grown beyond 10,000 now to be the MarTech Map, author of Hacking Marketing, editor of chiefmartech.com, VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, Scott Brinker. Welcome back, sir.
Wow. Thank you for that incredible intro, Casey. Great to be here with you.
Well, I'm just trying to keep up with you since we last talked. There's just so many things in this intro. If we talk again in a year or 2 years time, I'm going to have to just reserve, 15 minutes to just put it all down. Right.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. Right. So, hey, I want to dive into this marketing technology, MarTech. Things are changing. Things are moving. We're getting out of COVID. We're starting to see tech. You see here in the news and everything. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand you your old friend. It's heavy, but you wielded this thing perfectly last time. Okay, here we go. Thor's hammer. Go ahead, grab that. You got it?
All right.
Okay. Okay. Take Thor's hammer and smash for me some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Set the record straight once and for all.
Oh, wow. Well, we've certainly got the topic MarTech. Like, there is no lack of myths to be smashed. Let's start with the big one. Is MarTech consolidating? Is it expanding? What the heck is happening here? Because every single week, people read in the news about these stories of, oh, this MarTech company got acquired by this other company. So clearly MarTech is consolidating. Then I come around, once a year and I'm like, hey, well, here's the landscape of all the MarTech companies out there. And oh my God, it's like grown, like 20% again. Jeez. What is happening here? And so the truth is it's doing both. It is both getting consolidated and expanding. And if you're scratching your head and saying, wait, what? Is this like some sort of quantum physics riddle? How does this happen?
Yeah, the water is both liquid and gas at the same time.
Exactly. What's happening here is you can think of the MarTech industry as this huge long tail. At the head of the tail, you've got very large companies, public companies, as you start to go down the, tail a bit more, companies that have like 100 million more in ARR, right? And actually, these tend to be the companies that are doing the acquiring. And there's a lot of consolidation that happens there. when we just released the 2022 landscape last month, we skipped a year in 2021, but from like 2020 to 2022, there's something like 12% churn from 2020. 12% of the companies that were on the MarTech landscape in 2020 had gone away by 2022. Either they'd been acquired or they went out of business or they pivoted into something else. So yes, that is the sort of consolidation for us that you're like, yes, it should consolidate, right?
Yeah, I felt it, right.
But at the same time, like we had this over 20% total net growth because like 2,900 new companies had either entered the space or we discovered them in our research, and so this is what makes MarTech such a wild and crazy thing is yes, there's these consolidation forces, but for a whole bunch of reasons, the number of new startups and the number of even existing companies who decide to enter the MarTech space with, a new product continues to grow. Now, you might be like, okay, well, wait a second, hang on here. let's step back and try and smash another myth that is really closely related to what's happening with that. For the longest time, people used to frame the MarTech landscape as a binary choice. You could either go suite, which means, you just go to one vendor and they give you everything you need magically in one box,
right?
One throat to choke. It just everything you ever need.
One sales rep to annoy you each year.
Yes, exactly. To keep raising your prices.
Right.
Or on the other side, oh, well, you're going to go best of breed, which means good luck. You're entirely on your own. Sure, you can take all the best of all these different categories, but ooh, yeah, if you ever get to integrate them, boy, that will be a miracle. And the truth is, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that actually was the dilemma that was being faced. But what's happened over the past decade is most of the major MarTech companies have opened up their APIs. They've created ecosystem programs to really help all these other companies that are further down the long tail be able to integrate into these core platforms. And at the same time, all these new companies that are launching into MarTech, this continuing expanding long tail, they've now recognized that in order to sell their products, their prospects, one of the first questions the prospect asks is yeah, that sounds like a really nice functionality. Do you integrate with my existing platform?
Yeah, my CRM for sure.
Exactly. And so this age-old myth of oh, well, it's either, suite or best of breed. Let's just smash that. We live in MarTech in a world of platform ecosystems. And yes, I'm biased as VP of Platform Ecosystem for HubSpot. But right? It isn't just HubSpot. We see this across the MarTech industry. Right. Platform ecosystems, which are to say, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get all this functionality of these core platforms, which do tend to do a ton of things for you. But then for any sort of specialized need you have, or something that's unique to your industry or your stage or your strategy or some new emerging technology, you now have the option to plug that into your platform. So you're getting all the innovation of the best of breed, and you're getting all the coherence and the stability of the suite. And it is a platform ecosystem world. How am I doing on myth busting?
Oh man, this is great. I mean, Thor's hammer's on fire right now. You're totally crushing. You're just smashing, Venetian glass in a store. It's just smashing everywhere. What changed? Did we just get better at APIs? I mean, they're open and it's easier to do it, or we've got some good middleware that can just connect them all now. I mean, what has changed so that it's not so much like if you choose that best of breed, you're on your own?
APIs are not technical rocket science. Really what this came down to is a question of priorities. The large companies at the head of the tail that really need to be the platforms here, they had to prioritize, opening up these APIs, and not just having APIs, but you need the program support around that. You need these platform ecosystems, you need the marketplace, you need to be able to help people discover what works, you need to have some good governance, so you're managing the quality control of, what these things are. And then at the same time for the startups, again, it's just a question of prioritization. Every startup that goes out to conquer the world has their long backlog of oh, these are all the things we want to build that are going to be so amazing. And back in the day, integrating with other systems just didn't tend to reach the top of their priority list. But again, as we said earlier, because now you really have a hard time selling a solution to prospects and marketing if you aren't able to integrate with their core CRM or their core marketing automation system. Yeah, essentially startups got the message, and they're now prioritizing integrations as part of their core product, first-class citizen of how they actually go to market.
I wonder if they started prioritizing them higher up in the list because consumers got used to it, or they experienced it almost like we've heard people talk about what Netflix and Amazon have made it impossible for us to go to any e-commerce shop and not have a flawless choice and system and experience. And if we have anything that has friction in whatsoever, we're out because we're so used to it now. I wonder if some of these larger parts of the head of the creature here have just given us so many good experiences being integrated that when you look at the value of the lone wolf, it's I would love to get you, but if you can't connect, I'm just out. I mean, I don't want to play games with Excel and CSV files anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly that. I mean, at the end of the day, I have a lot of empathy for marketers that when they look at this crazy landscape of all these solutions, they feel like, oh man, this is such a challenge to figure out, which tools I want to use and where. And I fully acknowledge that is a challenge. On the other hand, there's some real upside for marketers. And it's not just that like, oh, well, there's all this innovation, all these companies, they're trying to innovate ways to make you as the marketer more successful. But the thing is, when you have this really large field, it is highly competitive among the MarTech vendors. And as a MarTech buyer, that's kind of a wonderful thing because, that really, starts to give you more power as the buyer to say, okay, these are the things I expect. And if you don't do this, somebody else is going to be more than happy to do it for me. And integration is exactly like in that bucket. And so, it's taken a few years for the feedback loop, to sort of embed itself into product roadmaps. But I think today, I mean, again, I'm biased. I tend to see this because I'm always looking for it, but I can't think of a single MarTech startup I've come across in the past year that part of their initial go-to-market didn't include, oh yeah, and here's how we integrate with at least one or two of the three core systems in the marketing stack.
Yeah, I guess by its very nature, because it's MarTech, you have to, well, at least modern marketers know that we have to integrate with sales. We have to be connected. We don't have data in a silo. So it's almost like we've matured as well, to the point where we're not interested in just buying a PPC app that can't report the data back in an effective manner, directly.
Yeah. No, exactly. You in fact, actually, we really do need to. I mean, every time we talk about MarTech, I always have to acknowledge that marketers and all the change that they have navigated here over the past 10 years, man, do they have my respect. It is, marketing is an Olympic sport at this point. And so, yeah, the people who have all matured in this industry doing this, yeah, hats off to them. But you're exactly right. I mean, the MarTech buyer of today, the marketing buyer of today, even the CMO, who might not have a technical background, might not even get into the weeds of marketing operations, they've been around in this industry here now for 10 years or so. They've probably gotten burned a couple times by like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that jaded, promise right? Didn't actually pan out. And they're just wiser, they're savvier, they've seen more of this, they understand the priorities, hopefully within their own org, they have a good marketing ops, marketing tech team. Hopefully they're like talking with, the CIO has become a true counterpart to them and not some sort of adversary as it was like a decade or more ago, and so I think you've just got a much savvier, marketing team and marketing leadership. Not to say we still don't have plenty to learn and, grow, but yeah, it is a much, much different MarTech buyer today than it was even 5 years ago.
And I think you're in this unique place to, I don't even want to say it's like tea leaves, but you having the data around you, it's almost like evolutionary science you see around you, popping up, all sorts of different things popping up randomly to see if maybe it can, take off. But then there's some sort of clusters where, wow, there is a need that isn't being met here, and it's time to fulfill it. So I imagine that as marketers have matured, you've sort of seen the evolution of these clusters. I know you have, I've seen like grouped into like loose bubble categories. Have you seen, just like you've seen some apps come and go, have you seen categories come and go? Or once a category is in, is it kind of like it's here to stay, and then we add more categories after that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's not that I can think of a whole category that's gone away, but you do see the categories evolve, and they evolve in a very rapid way. So let me give you a couple examples. So two of the oldest categories in MarTech were content management systems, web experience platforms, and ad tech, and so each of those, right? I mean, they're now like each 25 years old or something like this. So if there were any categories that you would expect, okay, it should just be completely consolidated, nothing new to see here, should be down to 2 or 3 winners, like with the CMS side, right? I mean, like the past few years have been this explosion of innovation around things like headless CMS, whole new ways of thinking about the web development stack and how that gets
Well, tell me more about
integrated.
this, because in my mind, maybe it's because I've been isolated in an ecosystem, but I haven't heard. I just assumed it was, HubSpot has a CMS. I know about WordPress, and I know there's a couple other ones that maybe enterprises might pick because they want some security. But are you seeing even in those like decades old categories, there are things afoot?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, like take the headless CMS, movement over the past 5 years. Like, products like Contentful, did not exist, years and years ago. Because the nature of what we want to do with content management has changed a lot, right? It's now not just about like, oh, well, how do we feed stuff up to these, web pages? But it's like, the web pages themselves very often will run to mirror capabilities, perhaps in a mobile app. We might also be having, these like interactive chat experiences that we want to be able to access the same content on demand. It definitely changes the nature. I mean, if you're depending on the nature of your business, you might have, kiosks and like retail outlets. We've just realized that there's this proliferation of digital touch points and digital channels, and ultimately what we used to think of as a web experience, mission, we realize is actually this broader digital experience. In fact, actually, that's now the name a lot of people use for this category, DXP, digital experience platform. Anyway, so like that's one example. Ad tech is another example where, I mean, for years there were, all these different, companies competing and innovating in the space, and it did start to consolidate really down to essentially, okay, well, there's Google and Facebook, and each of them had their own management platforms. And so you almost thought like, oh, I guess this space is pretty much all wrapped up. Last person in, turn off the lights. But now you look at today and oh my God, like this, partly because of the, death of third-party cookies, all of a sudden like, oh, well, actually individual sites and publishers now are starting to get a lot more agency, over what they're in a position to offer. But now we also think of, like these retail media networks, which is kind of a new thing. So like, oh, well, now it's not just, advertising through like Google and Facebook. There's all this stuff on Amazon, and now, oh, Walmart. And now all of a sudden, all these other retail groups are offering it. Right. And so now you have this diversification of all these ad-related channels. Once again, okay, now there's an opportunity for software that can help you manage this like much more complicated ecosystem of all these different ad channels. And so, yeah, ad tech used to be like, we thought that was all wrapped up and consolidated. Welcome to 2022. It is all new again.
Yeah, I wonder if that's just the expanding world of, better tech, but then more competition and, regulations changing. So it's just ebbing and flowing, and then you're seeing it adapt. I wanted to ask you, I really cool experiment. I think what we'll try to do is we'll link to it. I have 2020 and I have 2022 up in front of me, and it almost feels like just even cleaner and more organized. Maybe that's just because they're just little tiny circles instead of islands with full logos. Was there some thought around that? I love to hear just sort of the behind the scenes of, what at first made you create almost like these little continents that with the little archipelagos versus, okay, let's try to make, columns with subcategories, and just kind of take me behind the scenes.
Yeah, so there were basically 3 stages of this. In the first stage, when I was doing all of this by myself by hand, it was okay, these like very nice neat columns, square boxes, and I was trying to pack the full logo of each company in.
Yeah, and marketers, right, with their wacky logos that never fit that logo.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, that was one thing when we were talking 100 or 300. It started to be 1,000. Yeah, all right, this was already getting painful, but you took it to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. Yeah, it just was untenable. And so actually the 2021, the one that looks like all these continents, by that point in time, I had a team of like 9 people who were helping with this project. And the designer basically rebelled and said, all right, I'm just not going to like pack these things into these boxes, because the moment you have like one new one that comes in, oh my God, all of a sudden I have to like rearrange the whole
You
box.
redo
So
everything,
like
yeah.
this terrible ripple effect. So what he came up with, I thought was kind of brilliant, was let's do this the other way. Let's cluster all the logos together in just whatever way is easiest. And then we'll just draw a line around that category, and let's just see organically what it looks like, which is what 2020 did. Interesting. I will admit, harder to actually read. And
entertaining as hell, right? It's almost like a Where's Waldo book where,
yeah, well, I mean, almost any way you're going to organize this, at this scale, that was going to be the case. In 2022, I teamed up with Frans Ramirez, who does MarTech Tribe in the Netherlands. And there were kind of a couple really big innovations that he came up with here. One was, instead of trying to just get the full logo, let's just get the fave icon from these websites, because that's something actually we can harvest dynamically anytime we want to update it. Like, people are always, if they change their logo, they change their fave icon, hopefully. So it just became a lot easier to maintain. And because all the fave icons have a certain similar dimension, okay, now we can actually programmatically lay them out. Now, that had a lot of upsides. One of the downsides is when you're just looking at the fave icons, you're like, I have no idea who any of these
that's
are.
true.
So what we did was we also launched martechmap.com, and you can basically go there for free. And now you can see the map, but you can if you hover over things, it'll, show you who the company is, give you some stats about them, let you link off to them. But because it's all dynamic there, we also put in like a search bar, so you could filter for, oh, I'm looking for, companies, based in these countries, or I can type in a keyword and it will show me, oh, which are the subset of these companies that have that keyword in their meta description or their homepage. So anyways, it's been a journey, but yeah, when you're up to 10,000 of these things, it's like, wow, how do you manage this on a production level? But also, how do you make this even remotely useful for someone to find something?
True. But man, fascinating that what a cool move to do that. I even in my little nerd brain was thinking you could even create an app that maybe would go out and just grab the latest fav icon. And then the cynic in me was, who forgot to update their icon, and it just shows their default CMS fav icon.
We definitely found a few of those.
Yeah, a few of those. Is there
that's actually kind of a
would you like
too.
to be included in the MarTech map? If so, please design a fav icon.
Yeah, well, I mean, we joke, but actually, in all seriousness, if you're a MarTech company trying to sell other businesses on how to do effective digital marketing, if you can't get the basics of your own website together, it's a little bit of a warning flag that, maybe you shouldn't be, you're not quite yet ready to teach other people how to do it.
I had to just check my own website real quick to make sure I'm good. I'm good. I got
don't throw stones in the glass house.
Exactly. I'm good. Yeah, those idiots. So good. I had a question. So one of the things that I'm often telling new marketers is that the cool part about marketing, and also the trouble with it, is that just like only the CEO are we able to look over the entire organization and the big picture, from acquisition to see the whole user experience, the whole buyer journey, everything, even into retention and renewals and even having a great brand that attracts good talent, stretching into HR. It's we can kind of go over everyone's bucket, whereas all these other departments can be kind of siloed and focus on what they need to do. We could very easily lose focus. So my question to you related to that is, do you ever have to draw a line of is that actually marketing software? And because otherwise, couldn't everything be marketing software if we are overlooking everything? How do you define that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. In fact, actually, on the MarTech landscape, one of the major categories, one of the major columns, we call management. And if you look in there, I mean, all the subcategories are things like project management and collaboration tools. And you're absolutely right. I mean,
talent
those
management
tools.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Here's what we use. It's the idea behind the MarTech landscape was to say, we want to surface up the technology that marketers are using in their day-to-day work. And that if you're a CMO or a head of marketing ops, you need to understand how these pieces of technology fit into your organization. Now, a bunch of those technologies are purpose built for marketing. It's only going to, I mean, ad tech, it's only going to be the marketing department that uses it. But a bunch of these other things like, budget management software, talent management software, project management, collaborations, those tools don't necessarily exclusively get used for marketing, but in the marketing department, you actually need to be able to use these tools. A lot of them, you need to be able to integrate them with your other systems. It needs to be part of your operating system, as a marketing team. So we include them, but it is a totally fair criticism to say, like, I'm not sure I would call those products MarTech. I'd say, yeah, that's a fair, if you want to like write off the whole management column and say, no, that doesn't count. I feel free.
Well, no, and not to criticize, just to say it's a challenge. And so it sounds like what I'm hearing is if a marketer is using this on a daily basis, or if it's a tool that they use in support of marketing, then it should be included.
Yeah, and I think where we draw the line, and this is obviously where the art, versus the science is if it's a tool that marketing, it's in marketing, but it's not really used by. A great example would be like payroll. Well, we're going to assume you're paying your marketers, so the payroll software is relevant in some way to the marketing department as much as everyone else. But it's not really something that marketing ops thinks about. It's not something that, the CMO is going to be involved in the decision. They don't have to worry about integrating it with other things, So versus like something like, a project management tool, if you're going to use like Asana or ClickUp or Monday or something like that, that actually becomes a big part of your like departmental operating system. And so I think at that point in time, it's fair to say like, this is technology for marketers.
Yeah, just like the CRM and marketing automation connected is like that core hub, and all the other apps are hopefully sending data in there, normalized and ready to rock and report. Yeah, the operational side, one of these to-do lists might be the hub. It's either that or it's the billboard behind the CMO. It's the dry erase board with all the stickies on it. But either that or it's, and I've definitely encountered that. But but that's the hub. That's the lifeblood of where the marketers are keeping track of all these things that they have to do.
Yep, 100%.
So, have there been any new categories? It sounds like we've got the consolidation and the expansion. Have any new ones? Are there anything coming down the future, or are you eyeing future categories? Predict the future for us, Scott.
So one of the things we didn't do this year was add new categories, at least in the release we did last month. And to be honest, it wasn't because there aren't new categories. It's because we had our hands full, just like, bringing together this new system and, getting things launched with the current categories. So we're actually right now in the middle of saying, okay, now on to the next iteration, and going through the discussion of new categories. And there are new categories. I mean, again, without falling prey to the hype of this, like all the stuff that's happening around like NFTs, I mean, that is no matter what your opinion is of NFTs and crypto, you can't deny the fact that there's a whole series of marketers out there at different brands who are now engaging and using this stuff as part of, their strategy. And so, there probably should be a category for that. The metaverse.
Really? So real quick, so marketing and NFTs?
Yeah, right. I mean, all these brands that are using NFTs as, like they're starting to embed it into loyalty programs. I mean, some of it's just, to be honest, some of it is probably, in my personal opinion, a lot of it right now is sort of like the experimental hype of like, buy your Burger King meal and, you get this NFT that comes with it. I don't know. It's going to be super useful, but it's interesting because it gets Burger King in the news. And I'm making this up about Burger King. I don't know if they're doing this or not, but it's like I've seen that if you go to Ad Age or some of these like very brand focused marketing publications, they've had a lot of stories of brands experimenting with NFTs. So the reality is, if you're going to look at marketing technology landscape, at this point, you probably have to acknowledge that a bunch of these technologies around like launching NFTs and managing them are becoming part of what marketers are doing.
Yeah.
Same thing with metaverse too. I mean, all of that, and that is actually in many ways, I think, a lot more legit. I mean, it's more in the gaming side, so it depends on your brand if you have a good fit, but there is some seriously cool stuff happening, for brands creating experiences inside the metaverse to have their own sort of, simulated solutions. Obviously advertising and sponsorship is still very open there. How much of that is classic advertising, how much of it is something a little bit more bespoke, experience based? Yeah, and oh my god, like you could do a whole landscape just on companies that are sort of feeders into the creation of these metaverse experiences.
Yeah, it seems like as things evolve, it sounds like there's this sort of frothy bubble, almost like lava, right? There's the things that happen, and new things get started, and maybe it's all hype. I mean, I feel like this happened with ABM, right? It was kind of like, ooh, ABM, but it's like, wait, selling to accounts? Haven't we been doing that for like 30 years? Yes, but new, and then maybe, and then the tech eventually, some was fuzzy, and then eventually started to fall and say, hey, well, if you add someone to an account, you already have an account, wouldn't it be great that actually matched? Oh yeah, it makes sense. So it's almost like the hype gave way to some reality, which was we need some help doing these core things, like it after all that stuff was washed away. And so maybe that, I mean, we just continue to see that. So NFTs, that's the first time I ever heard of that. That's why you're here. I'm here to learn from you.
So there is, right, the very famous Gartner hype curve is exactly that. It's this idea that something happens, we hype the heck out of it and reaches this peak of inflated expectations. And then shortly thereafter, it plummets down where people are like, all right, well, it doesn't do any of the things we expected it was actually gonna, all that hype. Yeah, that didn't work out. But then once it goes down to that trough, it actually then slowly starts to rise again over time as people find like, okay, well, the things that were crazy unrealistic, yeah, that's not happening, but there is actual real value and there's real use cases, and those emerge over time. And so I definitely, yeah, would agree. A lot of the stuff around crypto and NFTs and metaverse and all that, we kind of, in fact, I would argue with NFTs, if you read the news, it sounds like we've maybe passed the peak height and now it's plummeting down on the other side of like, this is all scammers and, useless stuff, but maybe it will just go away. I don't think so. I think we will come out on the other side of saying, okay, there is a set of useful, real use cases, that this technology enables. And as we start to find those and learn those, and, there will be a stable rise over time. But yeah, we see this all over technology and certainly all over MarTech. I think your example with ABM is great too. It hit a high peak, then kind of like pulled back. But yeah, today it's kind of hard to actually find a B2B company that hasn't really embedded ABM, into its MarTech stack and, its overall operating system. They don't always go out of their way to label it. It's not necessarily just ABM software, but it's kind of built into the whole stack and operating system at this point.
Even if you're not still sure what it is, you might still have it in your stack.
Well, actually, right now, who was it? John Miller, who you could argue is one of the fathers of, ABM. When he launched Engagio, like his point actually was, well, even ABM is a bit of a misnomer because, there's components of this that we're doing in marketing. But to be honest, what makes this account-based strategy so successful is that it's a way for marketing and sales to really align together on how they win business. And as much of this account work is happening in sales and customer success as it is in marketing. So ABM isn't even really quite the right term for it, but it seems to be for better or worse, the term that is stuck.
I've definitely heard AB blank, right? Some
ABX, yes.
ABX, and we'll just blame Sangram for just being so good at creating communities that so we can't get it out of our heads. It's ABM now. Okay, it is.
Flip that funnel. Yeah.
Flip that. Exactly. And I see like the content category, which probably on that curve decades ago, you have to have a blog. What's that? But now something like 600 million of them, we kind of get the point. Like that's a mainstay. So it's almost like in the confusion and haze of what should marketing actually do, you're providing some clarity here, because there are categories that are early, but there are also categories that are just the bigger ones that are like mainstays. And actually, I have a request. Perhaps in the future, I would love to see the categories and where they sit, in your opinion, on that Gartner curve.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Oh,
because I'd love
yeah.
to know. I bet you would be the one that would know, because even maybe size you could extrapolate, where they're at.
Although this is the thing, so some of them you could look at the whole category, but others, like as we were talking about for like, say, the CMS, web experience, DXP, whatever you want to call it, it's almost like there were different eras of that technology, and those different eras are at different points in the Gartner hype cycle. So it might be a little bit, you might need a little more nuance than just the category, but if you go down maybe just one layer to say like major trends within those categories, yeah, that would be super cool.
You're right. I totally get that, right? Web, hey, it's fine. It's way over here. Well, not necessarily, because we got some new stuff happening that makes it earlier on the curve. So that might be challenging. But to your point, taking it down one layer or two, that might be able to show us that.
All right, hang on here. I've just had a very enthusiastic Labrador Retriever come into the studio, and
so now you gotta explain that.
My,
is that
virtual background? So the illusion is shattered.
What is that? What is that?
Oh, so people have virtual backgrounds. There's this company, AnyVoo. I'll give them a plug.
Yeah.
But just like people create green screens, well, they kind of create those things, except instead of being green, you can get whatever you want printed on it. You hang it behind you, but it just provides a nice, neat background up until the point that your rambunctious
your dog pushes it aside,
comes in and totally destroys the whole setup.
No, it's very subtle. I still, it just like the wall moved, almost like it was like a secret passageway. So I can see behind the curtain.
Let me take you into the inner workings of the MarTech landscape.
What was it called? AnyVoo,
AnyVoo.com.
Got it. And they got funny names.
Well, I mean, like, given all the companies out there, like, boy, it's hard to come up with a name that has a domain available. You can trademark it. It isn't like 50 letters. It's yeah.
You're gonna spell it wrong, and you gotta tell everyone every time you tell them, oh, it's spelled wrong, but don't worry, it's on purpose, right? And yeah, so many things going on there. Okay, any other category, any other movers? So you mentioned NFT, the metaverse. Any surprises that happen? Oh, we saw print. Wow, print's gigantic.
Yeah, actually, print keeps coming back. I mean, there's so much innovation that's happening here. I mean, again, it's like marketers are constantly in this battle of breaking through the noise, and it's either this search generally for new channels or new tactics. And what's interesting is these things sort of revolve over time. Everybody went digital, and so like direct mail and things like that, really dropped down. And then all of a sudden marketers start to realize, hey, nobody else is actually using this channel. Maybe I can use this, and actually it does, because like, oh, well, that's kind of novel, and then people started doing all the gifting solutions, and yeah, I've had people like, drop off, 4 packs of like craft beer, it's like, this is a marketing channel. And actually, to be honest, if it's your choice between sending me some spam, in cold email, or, a 4-pack of some craft brew, actually, please, send the craft brew. I'm still probably not going to buy the product, but, I'll appreciate that one a lot more.
I will probably take the demo for sure if you want to drop off a nice New England IPA or something like that. Make that that's my official stance. Drop off a beer and I'll join your 30-minute call. But you're right. I reserve the right not to buy anything afterward. Interesting topic around, marketing automation, marketing enablement type tools, and then sales enablement. And also interesting that sales enablement made the list. Could you talk to me about the difference between marketing tools and then this sales enablement thing? Because I always thought that would just get absorbed, but it seems to be a beast on its own. And then how does sales enablement make its way into the MarTech list?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a lot of companies, it is actually the marketing team that's building out the content in these sales enablement solutions for salespeople to consume. Not always, your organization may vary, but yeah, definitely a very common marketing responsibility. It's essentially almost your internal marketing, and then these tools that get leveraged, by salespeople to then send off to, their customers. Because it turns out, generally speaking, you do not want the salesperson having to come up with their own, specialized. Yeah, they have a certain set of talents and expertise. Marketers have a certain set of talents and expertise, and yes, the division of labor there has value.
You said what to our customer in that email?
Yeah,
to 10,000. You sent that email to
by hand in PowerPoint. Are you crazy? Have we shown our brand standards to you? Yeah, no, totally. And the truth is, enablement used to be a relatively simple thing, just because the number of channels in which sales was engaging, with customers were fairly limited. But one of the things that happened over the pandemic is you saw salespeople starting to engage with more and more, prospects and customers through a variety of new channels. I mean, certainly, video conferencing things, there were online chat things. There's, we're running virtual office hours. There's, maybe doing even deeper engagement with folks through like social networks or stuff like this. Jill Rowley, who is, like a sales extraordinaire in the MarTech universe, right? I mean, part of, her claim to fame was, just incredibly creative from the sales side of how to find and engage prospects and customers, through social channels and things like that, social selling, and so anyways, as more and more of that expanded in the pandemic, and sales teams, right, this became their lifeblood. They all of a sudden, it was digital or nothing. They started to really lean into this. And as a result, they were able to start to take advantage of more digital sales enablement tools, like how we do a demo, with a prospect can make a very big difference. A whole bunch of things in that sales enablement category that are about like next generation demo management tools. So it's a lot of creativity. Again, this is one of the things you could argue, is it MarTech? Is it sales tech? To me, it's probably in a case where if MarTech and sales tech are, a Venn diagram, those two circles overlap, and sales enablement is probably one of the things in that overlap.
Wow. Yeah. Speaking of overlap, obviously we're fellow marketing automation nerds, but the idea of still having an email marketing category when something like marketing automation exists, it's like, God, I just want to shake someone. And we've developed something new in the last 10 years. You should go check it out. Do you see? I guess you have to also track the lagging categories too. And not even that print is lagging. I mean, it can be. To your earlier point, it's sort of resurged back around. But when you have like it's when you have a really sharp CRM to have to track, almost like tracking on Excel. It's almost like you want to shake those people into innovating so you can put them in the appropriate category.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, maybe we'll get there. I think it's a great point, because when you look at the companies that are in that email marketing category, go to their websites. That is really their mission. They're like, yep, this is what we do for, email. There's a few of them that have tried to expand a little bit more broadly, but take MailChimp, for example, and I'll disclaim this is just my opinion, armchair analyst, but while MailChimp has a bunch of other, features above and beyond just its core email, as far as I can tell, like the brand, it's in the name, it's like so deeply rooted of like, oh, well, if I want to just have an email list and be able to manage the newsletter and something like that, I'll sign up for MailChimp. Right. And you've just got a ton of businesses that have done that. Anyway, but yeah, it evolves over time. There's some data that's going to be coming out in a report I did jointly with the team at MarTech.org. It's not quite ready to be published, but every year we do this like sort of career survey of, marketers, what they're using, technology. And for a number of years, and it's true again, the most common tool that marketers and marketing ops people spend their days with, spreadsheets. Here in 2022, it is still, so
spreadsheets.
All technology does not go away quickly.
Well, yeah, I once was chatting with a person. I think I was kind of advising him, and the company he was working at got rid of marketing automation, it was going back to spreadsheets. I was like, and you're staying?
Yeah, I'm not
Crazy.
sure we're making an argument for replacing marketing automation with spreadsheets, but I think the thing about spreadsheet, and this probably actually goes to the topic of like, the no code movement and all these no code tool products, things like Airtable and whatnot, is for all of our core MarTech systems, like marketing automation, like CRM, there's still become all these like process specific use cases that businesses want to build around these systems. And yeah, there are things that they aren't necessarily worth like going and building like, a huge software app for, but being able to like manipulate a bunch of stuff in Excel, or if you want to be a little bit more sophisticated, using something like Airtable, to pull that together. Yeah, there's just a ton of that actually goes into still the modern day marketing operations environment.
Fair enough. I mean, I used to have to do to do revenue in a freemium program. I used to have to do this FLS report, kind of like the TPS report in Office. It was called the
as long as you got the right cover sheet, you were good.
Yeah. And I was a marketing coordinator, and it would take me something on one day out of the week to do this report. And all it was doing was tracking these people did freemium. Did they ever buy anything? And it would do all these, and actually it was manual. And then I was just like, I'm not doing that. And so I figured out how to use macros just to make it happen. But you're right. There's some power to that. So in the end, you can, brute force, make it happen. If you can't find the tool.
And that's where the no code stuff gets really interesting macros with Excel are kind of, again, like an early version of that, but it's exactly right. It's like, I want both. I want the flexibility to craft something that's very unique to a particular process or something that's specific to my company. It's not a generic enough use case that there's an off-the-shelf solution for it. But at the same time, while I want to craft something that's very specific to my business and needs, I don't want to be doing it all manually, Yeah. So if I can have this more enlightened, Excel plus, environment where I can sort of create my own custom model, my own custom processes, but I can set it up so that it is automated, it integrates with my other systems, it pulls the right data when it needs it, processes it, then yeah, it's kind of the best of both worlds. And I think that's where we are in this journey is, again, a lot of people are still doing a ton of stuff manually, but it feels like, yeah, we are slowly automating and what would be the word, appizing, turning into apps, these, what used to just be a spreadsheet, now I've kind of made it into a little no-code app, and I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you can track all your to-dos on Excel. That's how we used to, right? So it's like, or on a piece of paper, but yeah, you can do it.
Post-it notes, yes.
Yeah, post-it notes, yeah, exactly. Dry erase board, absolutely. How do you stay impartial? I know you mentioned obviously you're HubSpot, and I have HubSpot now too. But at the same time, how do you it seems like you do, because they're all the same size. Even on the other chart, it wasn't like HubSpot's this big and all the other ones are like tiny, and some of those other force related apps are even tiny. No, it was all like, hey, this is the ecosystem the way I see it. Do you feel a certain responsibility to that? And then how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is, in fact, actually, when I joined HubSpot, this was a conversation we had, because my ask was, I want to keep doing this other thing with Chief MarTech, and yeah, it's in the big scheme of things, it's supportive for the industry that HubSpot's in, but yeah, just be candid, like if I started like turning all my Chief MarTech content into like favoring HubSpot, landing pages, people just stop paying attention to it. They're like, okay, well, and so
these guys are shit.
And to be honest, actually, HubSpot, like they got that right away because I mean, this is how HubSpot built its company on inbound marketing and saying, listen, we don't have to be selling you our solution all the time. If we actually just help you and we help educate you, then at the point in time you decide that, what software you want to use, hopefully that then puts us in the consideration set. And so, yeah, anyway, I will say, HubSpot, when I joined them, they said, yep, we'll not have any interference there, and they've absolutely lived up to their word. There's never been a single time anyone at HubSpot, has come to me and like, could you make the HubSpot logo a little bit bigger? Or,
just an extra pixel. Come on, man. Come on, Scott. What do you got? Just an extra pixel. Yeah.
And arguably the greatest value of what I do with Chief MarTech for HubSpot is my role at HubSpot is very much about like, okay, not just what HubSpot does, but really trying to understand the larger MarTech sales tech ecosystem and all the opportunities for like, HubSpot to be partners, with literally over 1,000 of these companies at this point. And so, yeah, at that point in time, like, again, if you're engaging in the broader ecosystem of these partnerships, you don't win friends and influence people by making it all about you. You make it about like it's all about them. And this isn't just like some sort of schmaltzy, talk on it. I mean, I genuinely believe this is what makes ecosystems thrive. Is it's not about any one company. It is about this whole universe and kind of how it fits together.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, HubSpot's had like several decades now of just educating marketers because university certainly isn't or hasn't, generally speaking. So I who didn't learn, as a marketer reading the HubSpot blogs and inbound type academies and, and learning what was what. So, I mean, there's been a nice history of that. So I could see how, when this comes in, it's like, of course, just teach the people and, and we'll be a part of it. I will say though, I think that you help keep them fresh and keep them young, if you will, because you could easily have a platform that snoozes and then starts losing because there's all these things people want to connect to. And it's like, it's too complicated. For instance, chat, right? Chat. I mean, there's a bunch of cool apps out there. Some have some great conferences, but the fact that even on HubSpot, you've got some chat. Thank you. It's just handy. It's easy. The code's already on there to track it. So voila, there's a chat. And guess what? It's integrated, and so it just and you might not have known that like an app could certainly have its head in the sand. They have their projects, but knowing that, oh, this thing's bubbling out or this thing's bubbling out over here, or have we considered ABM? It's starting to grow over here. I can imagine you helping inform the overall group of like, this is where this is all headed.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't know that I can take a tremendous amount of credit there. And the fact that, again, almost all these things like have the property that, pretty much to anyone who's paying attention to the industry, these things, become very clear. Again, I have fun with my pieces of trying to help illuminate some portion of it. But yeah, it's just the folks who are in MarTech, almost always get the stuff that I'm writing about. Like we're all kind of seeing the same things, But that being said, there's a very large world, of marketers who aren't yet in MarTech, I mean, and frankly, we all keep learning. I mean, there's not a week that goes by that I'm not coming across something I'm like, all right, I had no idea that existed, or what is this going to mean for marketing tech? I mean, just a lot of wild stuff happening in the technology innovation world.
No, they're absolutely wild and constantly changing and moving and really fascinating. Have you given much thought to the B2B versus B2C? I see the e-commerce platforms in there. HubSpot, obviously, primarily B2B, but not that needs to change anything like we just talked about. But if you got rid of one, would that make it simpler, or do you see them converging?
Oh, it's a great question. They are different in some ways and similar in others. I mean, a lot of this comes like, account-based marketing is a great example of something that, generally speaking, the plays you're trying to do around like, account-based, targeting and selling, would it make sense on a consumer basis? It's like, I'm assuming I have a, small target set and there are many decision makers and influencers in that, versus, some of these things that like, oh, well, I want to instantly click and buy this thing off of Instagram, I'm not sure we're at a point where you're going to do that for your CRM. But there's like a ton of, I mean, for us as consumers, we do. What's interesting is there's definitely a lot of shared DNA in the fact that ultimately, and this fellow Gord Hotchkiss, who used to be a leader in the search marketing space, eventually sold his company, I think he's retired, but he had this really brilliant insight I'm sure a number have had the same thing, which is, at the end of the day, you're still selling to people, whether it's, consumers or it's B2B buyers. In fact, actually in B2B buyers, that is a more emotional purchase than we typically like to think. I mean, for a long time, B2B was like, oh, well, that's the very analytical, it's all business suit and tie sort of stuff. No, like the emotional issues that people go into, like, the job risks they take in these decisions, like, do they have support of their peers? Because it's like a multi-person decision process. What are the politics involved in that? And so actually marketers who have that sort of, like emotional intelligence, awareness in what they're doing, that isn't just a consumer thing. That's incredibly relevant in B2B. But also, yeah, so the two inspire each other. We've got B2C purchases, like, I don't know, I mean, if we're picking something like a car, okay, it's maybe not a committee, but, if, I'm married, I have a partner, like, I probably should not just go out on impulse and, go buy the motorcycle. Like, there will be decisions and people weigh them, where are we going to go on vacation? What does this look like? So there are some of those ideas from how we think about multi-party, considered purchases in the B2B world that are also relevant in B2C. So anyway, all that is to say, yes, they have differences, but they also have really interesting overlaps too.
Yeah, as you're describing that, it started to make a little more sense to me where, yeah, you have the e-commerce, the endpoint, just like maybe you would have the landing page, marketing automation endpoint. But then all we're doing is we're just trying to get those eyes and that attention to some place, like get them to go there. So all the other categories I'm seeing, I see the mobile and, ad buys and all these other things it's almost like the method or the source or the medium or the channel to try to get people to those endpoints. So by capturing the endpoint of landing and shopping, you are then free to do all the other things that we need to do. And I never really thought about B2C versus B2B in like tech terms, but when you do that, it seems a lot closer, like really close. It's just a different ask when you get there.
Yep. Well, and again, just like in B2C, we've always seen the very like a lot more emphasis on brand marketing over, like, say, demand generation. Again, part of this comes down to like the nature of the consumer product and whether it has a channel. What's really fascinating is, like, yeah, we see now exchange in both ways, where a lot of B2B companies, brand marketing is making quite a comeback because people are realizing this actually becomes the amplification, the reputational value that changes the coefficient of how effective your demand generation programs are. Meanwhile, on the other side, in the consumer space, all those D2C companies, in a really interesting way, a lot of these D2C companies, they kind of look a bit like B2B companies in, like, the way they operate. And so a lot of them have like very strong, like demand generation programs, as part of their go-to-market. So anyway, all that is to say, I've always found it fascinating. I think each side of that has so much to learn and inspiration to draw from the other. And that was when whenever I'd organize those MarTech conferences, I always intermingled the speakers between the two, which some people hated because they were like, listen, I'm here for B2B or I'm here for B2C. I'm like, just step back for a moment and consider, like, what you might learn from looking how, something that on the surface feels like a very different kind of business. But I think you might find some inspiration ideas that could really be game-changing for what you do in your field.
100%, right? I mean, so many, I've seen B2B neglect landing page optimization because why wouldn't they want your content? Well, I don't know, because it's terrible, but like it below the fold buttons, and there's absolutely something to be gained from the folks who live and die by did you buy, did you click? We're not going to get you next time. You're going to buy the thing and you're going to be gone. It's like we need to get you, but at the same time, your point, let's nurture those B2C buyers and get them to come back, be loyal fans, and really. Brand, I love this point you made, brand for B2B being so important. How can it not be when I'm staring at 10,000 fav icons on a page? The page can't even handle, like my browser can't even, like, scrolling, and it's like, yep, there's so many things here. You have to have a brand. And I think HubSpot was one of the originals where it was just like this brand. We used to when I didn't have HubSpot, I used to make fun of HubSpot users as drinking the Kool-Aid, because you try to talk to them about some of their
And then
tool
you
and
drank
they're
the
like,
Kool-Aid and you're like, hey, this tastes pretty good.
right, and then right now, if someone's like, hey, you remove this, this other thing, I'm like, life is simple right now. I don't really want to make it more complicated unless it's something that's really good, but I still don't. So now I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. But yeah, HubSpot was one of the original champions to be able to do that. I know Drift and some other people just made it just more than the app itself. It was the community and the feeling. And you're right. You're right. I mean, it is that emotion, right? That it's not a spreadsheet calculation always, as much as it is, how does this product make me feel? Do I feel like a success, or do I feel the good feelings when I work with this tool?
Yeah, no, 100%. You mentioned Sangram earlier, and right, again, like flip my phone. I mean, Terminus is always like one of these like incredible stories for me, because I mean, again, like a small company based out of Atlanta, this talk about, a sea of thousands of other MarTech solutions. How do you break through that? They broke through it, and I credit it almost entirely to Sangram, of that whole flip my funnel movement, and he actually did the right thing of like pulling in, competitive overlap products and trying to like, let's make this a bigger story, which certainly grew the category. But because it was Sangram and Terminus that were the ones like pushing that, initiative, they got enormous brand cred over it. I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for that. Like, I mean, not to take anything away from all the other people who built Terminus, I think Sangram was sort of the pivotal one who like, that is the reason why that is like a multi-billion-dollar brand. So just,
you should definitely take a bow for that. Yeah, and you know what? Those events were actually fun to go to. And you actually learned something. You had great speakers, and they actually practiced what they preached. I remember them tweeting at me saying, "Come to our booth." And this is a ABM story I'll tell every day till I die. There was a mason jar with a handle on it, because Georgia, and so a glass mason jar with a handle, and it had my logo of my last company in, like, I don't know if it's decal on the front of it. Like, how many of these things did you make? You obviously couldn't make it for 5,000 people. Could you? I made it for a couple hundred. Like, and it's one of those stories you just keep telling, because it was like such a wow that it was, of course, it was full of chocolate and alcohol nips and all sorts of other goodies. But the logo on the front, I'm like, this is my glass. This was, so they very much practiced what they preached. And they stood out from the list. And I think that's the marketer's challenge, is just, how do you buy, like, they're just little icons now. How do you stand out from the crowd?
Yep.
So love to ask you, video. I see video, showing up nice and strong. I hear a little bit more about it. Some of our friends all around the place, little bomb, little Vidyard, all these people are starting to move things and shake things. And I think we're finally realizing that we can do video, and it's not a bandwidth thing like it was 10 years ago. Like, we've been smashing myths today, like, oh nope, that was solved. It was solved 10 years ago. Video is a thing. What about podcasts? Have you seen that pop up?
Oh yeah. In fact, actually, you were asking me earlier about new categories we need to add to the landscape. Yeah, podcast is one of them. And actually on 2 locations, because there's a whole set of tools now that are used for creating and publishing podcasts. I mean, some really creative tools for this. And then also now increasingly, we were talking about different advertising channels. These advertising networks, that are being built around podcast networks too, are emerging. So yeah, no, it's definitely an area. And even video too continues to, grow and expand. This whole sort of, revolution around, these streaming services, particularly as they start to take, more advertising, how do you think about managing that in a more programmatic fashion? Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about MarTech is we are a long way away from the dust settling and being like, yep, everything's all set. We can write the textbook. You can go to college, read this textbook, come out, and it's all straightforward. It is every year just learning, like, okay, what's new, what's changing, how do we adapt? So
Yeah, you've got the right approach, because if you were just trying to keep it at a 5,000, then up pops this other topic, and then you're about ready to retire, and then NFT surface, right? And it's like, oh, I can't leave. I must keep going. More categories keep surfacing. But I think the core pillars seem to be establishing themselves, even if they continue to reinvigorate themselves. That you see the sort of solid things certainly being here, and then these sort of fringe fun things on the periphery. But that fun thing is maybe where the advantages start showing up. So
yeah, and while today's fringe fun thing, becomes tomorrow's like mainstream channel. I mean, there was 100%. A point in time where right, video was kind of fringe on that. Podcasts started out being really fringy. Metaverse today, we kind of think of NFTs, we think of them as kind of fringy, but 5 years from now, 8 years from now, 10 years from now, yeah, I mean, all those things just taken for granted as like mainstream channels and platforms. So yeah,
I definitely got to learn more about the NFT side. I had a friend reframe it for me, and I thought, oh, okay, it's not the buying artwork thing. It's like, no, that's not always the buying the artwork. It's the idea of digitally signing things and contracts, and there's just more to it. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. What about AI? I don't know if I saw a category for that.
Yeah, so that's interesting. We may add a category for that. We're debating that right now. The reason I hadn't added a category for it yet isn't because there isn't a ton of AI in marketing, but because actually quite the opposite. AI is now getting built into almost every MarTech product. Now it might be just some simple machine learning, models with one product. Maybe it's more of a generative AI, conversational AI capability in another one. Gotcha. But almost all MarTech companies are leveraging some kind of AI. And so it's also a little bit like the no code stuff. I have the same thing, I've debated like creating a whole no code category, but the thing is, so many no code like features are getting embedded, and so many MarTech that you're almost like, okay, this is something that's sort of like raising the entire industry. But that being said, there are actually a set of products out there that are almost pure AI products that then marketers are increasingly, if they have technical folks on their team, buying these AI-based products and then building their own custom things around them. And so I think there probably is a case for legitimate AI category that supports those kinds of underlying platforms and components. But yeah, AI overall, yeah, it's everywhere.
It's like a great clickbaity descriptor key, in my opinion. I've seen a lot of hyper. So I think it's early on that curve we were talking about earlier, or not super early, but it's somewhere in there. It's in the confusing spot right now. So I can see how it's being used across the board on these categories you already have. So that makes sense why it wasn't there. I was about to be like, oh, see, I knew it was complete crap. Scott didn't put it on his chart. It's not real, but I understand. It's mixed in amongst everything else.
Yeah, and actually a lot of the best cases, you wouldn't even know it. I mean, I don't know, like I'll give it one example of like, so we're talking about, marketing automation, email marketing, send time optimization, which is this sort of really, I mean, very simple, obvious functionality of saying, hey, if I'm going to send a bunch of email to thousands of people, probably historically there's, some information to indicate like when would be the ideal time to send it to each of these different folks, something that would make no sense to do manually, where there'd be no ROI for that, but for a very simple machine learning model to sort of look at like, when do people open stuff and keep track of that over time. And then over time, basically adapt when you deliver things to individuals. It's not rocket science. It's probably not even worth shouting from the rafters about, but if you're a marketing automation or email marketing product, like having something like that built in, yeah, it's just sort of taken now as a feature. And like, yeah, I don't use AI. I mean, yeah, sure, we have send time optimization in there.
It's like the same thing. Yeah, but by the way, that sounds really cool. And then you avoid the conversation with the CMOs like, oh, when are we going to send this thing? Oh, it's being sent this week across space and time. It's being it's send optimized at the individual level, at the individual email address level. Oh, okay.
Pretty cool, right?
Let me know how the click-through rate goes. Yep, I will.
I mean, you have to be a bit of a, marketing MarTech nerd to like appreciate it, but yeah, guilty as charged. So
really cool. Yeah, really cool. And then every website changing dynamically to show you what you need to see. Love it. So good. So you back to podcast. So you do see potentially adding those in the future? I know it's like we're using it and we're on it, but it's like, where does it fit into the model?
Yeah, so we'll probably put it in the content and experience,
Makes sense.
column, obviously, with the possible exception that we might also have something in the advertising and promotion. So it's the difference between, are you creating and publishing your podcast, or are you placing advertisement sponsorships in other people's podcasts? Sort of two different use cases and two different. I'm pretty sure we'll add that. I think part of the question for us is always, because we don't like to get too granular.
Yeah.
We always sort of look at like, okay, are there sort of larger clusters here? So, I don't know. I mean, there's still interesting things happening with radio. That's evolving. Like, where is the line between podcasts and radio and streaming services? And, do these things all sort of fit together in some large?
Right. And the
category?
webinars and the.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's a problem you have to solve. I'll solve other problems. That sounds challenging. I can see how, but it also sounds fun. I can see how you could really try to figure it out.
Well, I mean, I joke with people like the three hardest things in marketing, products, SaaS: naming, what do we call this thing?
Yep.
Pricing, what do we price it at? And categorization. Like, categorization is hard because very often the most innovative solutions are innovative because they're not trying to fit into a category box. They're trying to solve a problem for a customer. They're trying to approach a job to be done. And that job to be done might span multiple categories. It might be something kind of different, but analysts, and people like me who are putting logos in boxes, like, okay, well, we need categories to put these things in, and you can't have everything as a category of one, or you basically, okay, that's effectively no categories. But it sucks because, I mean, so many products, what's best about them, can't be really captured in saying like, oh yeah, that's just a email marketing tool. Like,
right.
No, let's kind of come up with a different way of thinking about that. So,
well, and marketers aren't making it easy for you because half of us are reinventing a brand new category every other day, right? Just to make ourselves stand out from this crowd. Oh, no. We're not marketing automation. We're AI optimized send mailer friends. We're something completely different. You're like, okay, are you really? How do you deal with that? Do you ever have like issues like people just trying to say that they're not something, but like, no, you're a chat app friend. You go in that category.
Yeah, I mean, it actually, the larger the MarTech landscape has become, the less that's become a problem because nobody can read it anymore. So they're like, I don't even know what category I'm in. I can't find it. So it's tamped down a bit. But yeah, there still are folks who are like, just debate the category we put them in. And to be honest, actually, I'm always happy to have those conversations because, we're trying to pull this from the outside looking in, like we'll read their website, we'll, look at the examples they presented, what customers are doing with case studies, and based on that, we'll make our best guess. And if they come and they have like, no, we're not that, we're this other thing. I guess my question to them is like, okay, well, this is what I was reading on your website and reading in your case studies. What you're saying now is different than that. Are you sure?
So what you're telling me is this. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. And again, this kind of goes back, like we were saying, like, hey, listen, if you don't have a fave icon that represents your brand, you might not yet be ready, for varsity MarTech. I think it's kind of the same thing around like, hey, listen, from a positioning perspective and making your messaging clear, if you don't have that on the homepage of your website in a way that someone like me can come to it and ask, what do you guys do? Who would I be comparing you against? Then it's kind of like, okay, well, are you sure you really want to be teaching other people about digital marketing, because your digital marketing is a little bit fuzzy here? Just being honest.
Yeah, it's a
So,
little blurry here. Oh man, and Scott, I did, as I was perusing the list, I do believe I have found the friends here that I noticed that WordPress was in just a few categories. Well, it's not actually WordPress. I think it's our there should be a naughty list of people who need to update their fav icons.
yes, yeah. I mean, again, like actually to your point earlier, when you're like, before I make a comment here, I'm going to go quickly check my own website just to double check. I mean, I actually, yeah, I do have a lot of empathy for the fact that marketing is complex. There's so many moving parts, there's so much change over that happens in companies. Yeah, it's, I actually try not to make fun of people. I mean, there's jokes that you can obviously make, and some of them set them up, and they'd probably be funny. But I kind of have still like the sympathy and empathy that this stuff's just hard. There's just so many moving parts, and so yeah, and not in a good position to throw rocks. But again, if you're coming and you're saying you need to be in a different category, and what you're saying is just very different than what your webpage says, then I think it's a fair ask to say, have you considered updating your website?
Totally. Yeah, I'll make fun of them for us both, and then but I'm as guilty as I'll count myself guilty as all of them. The only reason I have a fave icon is because, thank God, whichever web team I hired, thanks Pat, decided to do one when they did the web project. Right? I didn't even remember to ask for it in the proposal. They just made sure it was covered. So somebody else had my back on that. Yeah, and that brings me, I really kind of like a final question, sort of wrap things up, is around this area of, it's hard. Do you have any guidance for, I mean, even like an order of how you go through this, or if you're going to be acquiring, you can't buy all 10,000 tools.
Oh God, no.
Are there certain categories you should have? And does this help inform us of that? Or do you need to draw on your own strategy? Any advice you have for
yeah, so I will make the immediate and forceful disclaimer here that the MarTech landscape should never be used to try and like figure out your strategy of like, yeah, what your MarTech stack should be. It is at best, just sort of an interesting observation of the scale of the industry, but when it comes to like figuring out like what you actually need in your company and how you should prioritize stuff, do not start with the MarTech landscape. Start with actually, okay, what are your jobs to be done? I always find that framework from Clay Christensen to just be so useful, because it kind of cuts through all the noise. It's like, okay, what are the core things I'm actually trying to do? Like, all right, well, I need to generate these leads. Okay, like, where am I going to do that? Through what channels? What's going to be the experience for the people who, when they're getting that generated? How do I like look at that cycle? What do I need to provide? And you start to map this out, and then you start to go back like, okay, how do we execute on that? What tools do it? And again, I think for most MarTech stacks, there's like a core set of things around like your CRM, your marketing automation, your like CMS/digital experience platform. There's just some of these things that, frankly, if you get those core foundational elements right, you could probably do about 80%, of the things that need to happen in your most important jobs to be done. And then depending on your business, your customers, where you're trying to reach them, what strategy you're using for go-to-market, what region you're in, what state. I mean, there's a bunch of things that start to then get much more specific to your company. And at that point, you might look to say like, oh, okay, well, I actually want to augment, these foundational capabilities, with something very specialized. Like if I'm in a field where influencer marketing is going to be an important part of my strategy, then I probably want to start looking at some of the technologies to help manage influencer marketing at scale. But everything should be driven by like, okay, what's your business actually trying to do? And, and then seek the technologies that, almost, what did they say that, like the Occam's razor, the simplest possible, answer is generally right. There should be a version of this for MarTech stacks of like, other things being equal, the simplest stack is best. but
yeah, simplest, almost
no
even
simpler.
smallest, right? Like it's not a badge of courage, badge of honor to have more apps than everyone else. That probably means you have a few too many, you have some overlap. So yeah, I love the fact that, the chief of all MarTech is saying, don't use this as a shopping list. And even as tempting as for me, I always tell people strategy, process, then technology. And even looking at these categories, I'm going, ooh, that's tempting. So it's good to look at. It's great for for informing on categories, but we got to set our own strategies. We can't get distracted.
Yep. And I think, again, I always say, like this whole thing about strategy, process, technology, I think is the right model, with one small exception, which is, as new technology continues to come out, it opens up the possibilities for new strategies. And so I do think it is worthwhile looking at, technology just from a technology perspective, for a sake of understanding, there might be some new possibilities of how we can evolve our strategy, given that this capability now exists in the world. That being said, I think that's a very small thing. Like if we're going to talk ratio, it's probably like 90% strategy, process, technology, and then maybe 5 or 10% of like, new technologies that might inform how we want to evolve our strategy. So
100%. And that's why this is so helpful for us, is because maybe our strategy needs just a little information. We need to close that loop so we know where to go next. Love it. Scott, where can I direct people to connect with you, to connect with your projects? Throw out some social connections, some websites, all the things.
All right. So my website is chiefmartech.com, but without the H at the end of the tech. Long story. We won't go into that. And then actually, that's my Twitter handle too, @chiefmartech, without an H at the end. And always happy to engage with people there. Of course, if you're interested in platform ecosystems in the MarTech land, by all means, check us out at HubSpot and the app marketplace for HubSpot. And you gave all these kind shout outs to all the other stuff I did at the opening of the show. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And all those things, we'll put in the links in the show notes and all that, so people can click right through. So they can.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to catch up with you again.
This is really fun. I'm surprised, but not surprised, just how much I learned. And I'm so glad for people like you, because otherwise I would be one of those email marketers apps that hasn't, I need to stay informed as well. And this is my favorite way to do that. So thank you so much for coming on here.
My pleasure. Have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. And I just want to really quick thank those who are listening and challenge you. If you've learned something, and I freaking know you did, because I literally have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back, then share this with someone else. That's how you're a thought leader. 1 person, 9 people, 3,000 people, it doesn't even matter. Just get this good information. There's so many things we talked about, so many things we covered. We talked about, it's not a binary choice, about platforms, about suites, about NFTs, the hype phase, Gartner's, everything. There's so much here. Definitely share this episode with someone else. And with that, Scott, thank you again for being on here.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day.
You too, man. And this has been just a super cool episode of the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will catch you all next time.